It is the start of the holiday season, which means we are on a permanent bulk. Welcome to Strength Weekly, the weekly show that brings you everything you need to know from around the barbell game. I'm David Thomas Tao. I'm joined by Phil Bleckman. Today we're talking about 1,000-pound deadlifts for reps, BarBend's latest acquisition. We are a businessman, as well as some other important things on the docket. But before we get to that, make sure you subscribe to BarBend on YouTube. Phil, how are you feeling today, and what is your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
I'm ready to talk about some heavy deadlifts, and my favorite dish obviously has to be sweet potatoes covered in marshmallows. Give me the calories. Let me get all this bulking going on. I love me those side dishes.
Phil, I am disappointed because while that is great and a variety of carbohydrates, it is low in protein. What are you doing with your life?
Oh, come on! You know, we gotta scoop some of that whey in that stuffing. What does your Thanksgiving look like?
I'm actually going to throw this out there: vanilla whey protein in sweet potato casserole, or like on sweet potatoes. That actually could be pretty good and creamy. You know what I mean?
I'd eat it. We should do a chef reactions to that. 10 out of 10. I'd eat.
Put some vanilla whey in your sweet potatoes. It might be terrible. It might not. Couldn't tell you. All right, first up today, Jamal Browner deadlifting 1,000+ pounds for 4 reps. Phil, if you wouldn't mind, take us through this lift, and then we will compare it to very few historical precedents.
This is not the first time we've seen him deadlift 1,000 pounds. We've seen him do it multiple times before. This is the first time that he's done it for 4 reps, which is why it's quite notable. He also recently competed for the first time in strongman. So the dance between, is he a strongman, is he a powerlifter? In my view, he's still very much a powerlifter. He still trains very much as a powerlifter, but he was so good at deadlifting that literally he was invited to compete at the World Deadlift Championships with a bunch of strongmen because they saw how good he was in the deadlift on his social. Like, you can go to his deadlifts on his Instagram and see strongmen be like tagging Giants Live and being like, should this guy deadlift at the World Deadlift Championships? Like, maybe he should get an invite to the World Deadlift Championships. And he did. And then he competed as a strongman for a little bit.
So we asked around for all the knowledgeable folks at BarBend, and this 1,002-pound quadruple really only has historical precedence in 2 different lifts. One, Chris Duffin's 1,002-pound double deadlift, nearly triple that he did with straps and in a sumo stance. And then Krzysztof Wozbicki actually did triple 1,016 pounds against sumo and with straps. But really only 3 people that we know of, recorded on video, have taken over 1,000 pounds for multiple reps in the deadlift. Phil, of Browner, Duffin, and Wozbicki, which do you think stands out as the most impressive to you?
Well, you can't discount Wozbicki's like heaviest ever. I mean, it's the heaviest ever. I mean, it's in training, but it's the heaviest ever. I think Browner's just been really impressive for a really, really long time. So the fact that he's like dabbled in both conventional and sumo, and we've seen him be able to deadlift extremely heavy in both, also is pretty impressive. And as you said, all of these deadlifts that are 1,000 pounds plus have been with straps. So they were not done raw, which you would need to do if you were competing in a raw competition. But really impressive nonetheless.
We saw at the World Deadlift Championships in jolly old England, he did 430 kilograms conventional. Now, I'm interested to see if he were to train specifically for the World Deadlift Championships, what he could actually show up and do, and if he could push, close to that 500 kilo mark with more specific training. What other things should we keep in mind when comparing powerlifting style deadlifting, comparing that to strongman style deadlift competitions?
A couple of notable differences. In strongman, you're always typically allowed to wear a suit, which would be considered equip lifting. You can always use straps, but you must lift conventional. There is no such thing as sumo deadlifting in strongman. That doesn't exist. Another notable difference, though, is in strongman, you are allowed to hitch the barbell. If you can get the bar locked out off the floor, doesn't matter how you get there. Conventional stance, get it up. That's it. In powerlifting, you call whatever your weight is on the barbell and you get 3 attempts. And you choose what weight is going to go on the barbell and you're competing against yourself. In strongman, you lift in rounds. It is dedicated weights that each athlete has to like lock out and secure. And so you could go into 7 rounds of deadlifting, incrementally increasing that weight all the way. And so, your top lift of, let's say somebody actually was able to contend with 500 kilos, if like that's the case, but it was on rep 7, it's like, okay, well, your nervous system just took 6 reps of extremely heavy weight up until that point, which would be a lot more load than what you would see in a powerlifting competition. Granted, they've also already squatted and bench press by the time that they deadlift, so maybe there's some comparison there. But in strongman deadlift, you go until if you're hitting max, the rounds just keep going until they can't go anymore and somebody wins.
Well, we will transition quickly into the next story of the day. Look, at BarBend, we normally report on the news, and sometimes, very occasionally, very rarely, we actually make the news, or at least we're calling this news, because guess what? BarBend has acquired Morning Chalk Up. Morning Chalk Up being the premier coverage outlet for functional fitness and CrossFit, both on their website, their social channels, and via their very popular newsletter. They've been around since 2016, and guess what? They're part of BarBend now. We acquired them.
This is Joe Jennington Palawa, managing editor of the Morning Chalk Up. We are very excited to be joining the BarBend and Pillar 4 news team. I speak for the whole Morning Chalk Up crew when I say that we are amped for the opportunities that this new partnership is going to afford us. BarBend and Pillar 4 have made it their mission to be at the center of coverage of all things strength and strength sports related, and Morning Chalk Up is going to play a key role in bolstering that mission.
What I want to get out of the way is that not much is going to change about MCU if you get their newsletter. Look, I'm biased. I founded BarBend, right? I did this because I wanted more coverage for strength sports, and I believe in BarBend's continued mission. Still, you've been covering the strength game for a while, including CrossFit. What does this acquisition signal for you as far as how we as an organization are going to cover that sport, that realm of fitness?
I mean, I think high tide raises all boats. The combining of the minds at 2 elite coverage outlets for CrossFit is only going to make the CrossFit coverage better. And we talked on the last episode how there are changes going into the 2024 season. So it's actually a pretty ripe time for this acquisition to happen, because as there are some big changes in CrossFit, there will be some changes in CrossFit coverage, but it's all for the better. So
I do want to quote BarBend's senior editor, Jay Serafino, who will be doing a lot of the good work integrating BarBend and Morning Chalk Up and actually building out expanded Morning Chalk Up coverage. Here's what Jay Serafino says. The main thing is that we want to continue putting out the content that fans love from MCU. It's Morning Chalk Up, little acronym for you. So they'll get the same high quality competition analysis and unique stories from the community as always. But we're also looking to revitalize the subscription content and are exploring exciting partnership opportunities across brands with different content creators. MCU laid a great foundation over the years. The next step is to keep building upon it and exciting new opportunities and initiatives. We're going to continue with what Morning Chalk Up has been producing, but add new lenses to see CrossFit and to see this community both on the competitive and non-competitive side, which makes me really excited. All right, Phil, but enough about CrossFit. Let's go back to powerlifting, because we have a 57 kilogram woman back squatting 227.5 kilograms. That's just over that glorious, beautiful 500-pound mark. That's Kenia Montserrat. Did that at the IPF Equipped World Championships in the world of powerlifting, a record that stood for 4 or more years, or even 5 years in this case, is a bit of a rarity, especially because of the sport's growth, how many great lifters are really pushing the envelope there. So this is one we've been looking at for a while. If you look at the record tables, like 2018, that's old in this game. Phil, what do you think about this squat?
If you look at all the federations, this is an IPF Equipped World Record, which means that the IPF sanctioned it. So any event that the IPF sanctions is where this record would be contested or where it would count. Montserrat has been in the game for a long time. I mean, like looking at her resume since she was in her teenage years. However, despite breaking the world record, she did not land at the top of the podium. She has yet to win the IPF World Championships, although she's competed multiple times. She has not actually won that title yet, despite breaking the world record here. But she has won on the world stage many a time. She's won at the Pan American Championships. The fact that she broke this record, obviously notable. It's a world record lift. And I think now it's just if and when she is going to actually win a world title. It feels like an inevitability, as it does often the case when somebody cracks a world record and isn't only a specialist in that lift. She's a well-rounded lifter, and I expect more from her going forward. She is a top lifter at the Pan American Championships every year, like expected to gold at the Pan American Championships. So yes, tip of the hat to Ecuador. Well done. You have a champion powerlifter.
All right, let's move on, because one thing we want to ask, this isn't so much a news story, this is just fun. Who's the strongest Mr. Olympia winner? Dr. Connor Heffernan, who is one of the world's premier strength historians, if not the premier strength historian, he wrote an article a little while back that we wanted to highlight on BarBend. Who's the strongest Mr. Olympia? And he broke down 10 different Mr. Olympia winners and compared them. Yeah, we actually have 2 potential winners for who the strongest Mr. Olympia is. So this isn't one of those like clickbaity articles where you ask a question and there's no answer, because he came with receipts. That's the best part about this.
So not only is this like a calibrated class to the people who have won the Olympia, but it's also a calibrated class of the Mr. Olympia champions who are like, I'm lifting to max out in my training, that we can actually pull receipts from. So it becomes even more narrow of that class, because not only is it the athletes that are the strongest, but also we're like, I'm going to be the strongest.
Yeah, I got to be honest, backstage at the Olympia, the athletes aren't asking each other how much you bench, right? They're asking about body fat percentage. They're asking about symmetry. That's what they're focused on, right? This is a physique sport. It is an aesthetic sport.
On this topic, one of the, I think, simplest and most ideal quotes for this type of discussion is one from the 2023 World's Strongest Man, Mitchell Hooper, who, when asked about what is the difference between something like strongman or powerlifting versus bodybuilding trains muscles. Strongman and powerlifting trains movements. You are looking to be aesthetic on stage as a bodybuilder. If you have a really good, flawless technique in your deadlifts, if that's not actually helping you develop the muscles to look good on stage, it's not your goal. So this is like very, very specific to these athletes of going, not only am I lifting heavy, but I'm doing it in a way that might be different from how somebody might max out if they were training for a powerlifting competition or a strongman competition.
We got to start with Ronnie Coleman. King Ronnie, 8-time Mr. Olympia winner, 8-time consecutively, just want to point out. Ronnie Coleman, this man showed up conditioned at about 300 pounds on stage, and he is not that tall, but he is what was wide as a house. Big Ronnie Coleman. Yeah, buddy, lightweight, ain't nothing but a peanut. Ain't no one want to lift these heavy ass weights, but I'll lift the weights. Ronnie Coleman out of Texas, back squatting 800 pounds for a double, deadlifting 800 pounds for a double. Those videos are legendary. What I think is interesting about Coleman's training, it's a bit unlike basically anyone else in the top realm of bodybuilding. He was lifting equipped. You see his world famous, and there's like a whole generation of people who are brought up on these videos on YouTube. I am among this generation. You know, his back squat, 800-pound back squat double, he's doing it with a squat suit, right? Like most bodybuilders are not even thinking, yeah, I need to put on a squat suit, because they're training the muscles, they're not training the movement, right? But here Ronnie is, he's like, I'm going to get the best of both worlds here. And for him, it worked. For him, this incredibly heavy, overloading stimulus, it did work, and it helped him craft what some would argue is the greatest physique of all time.
I would argue that Ronnie also has the most famous lifts never done, because anytime he's ever been interviewed about this lift, he's always like, had more in the tank, could have done another. Like it haunts him to this day that he didn't like get another one.
It's just remarkable stuff, and it coincided with like the early days of YouTube and the early days of video virality, and it's just a perfect storm. And Ronnie is just such a showman, right? Like Ronnie Coleman is a man born to be a bodybuilder, right? Not only for his physique and his work ethic and his dedication to that lifestyle, as difficult as it is, and it certainly took a toll, and he's the first to admit that, but his personality is effervescent, and you can't help but not like I've never met anyone, whether they've met him in person or just followed him through his career and after, I've never met anyone who's like, I don't like Ronnie Coleman. Okay, I got to move on. We're going to talk about Franco Columbu, who really was a stalwart of a golden age of bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger's training partner and best friend. Now, Franco passed away a few years ago. Franco was truly one of the most famous and most successful crossover strength athletes we've seen. Here are some of his reported max lifts: a 655-pound squat, 525-pound bench, and 750-pound deadlift. And thing that's really funny about him is if you watch Pumping Iron back in the day, everyone refers to him as the strongest bodybuilder at the time. He was also like the smallest guy on stage as far as stature, but they refer to him as the strongest bodybuilder, right? They're like, oh yeah, Franco can lift the most. And there's even a video of him lifting a car to move it in his Italian hometown in Sardinia. Like there's a clip in that movie of him like lifting the fender of a car to get a car out of the way, right? Dude was massively strong, and spoiler alert, pound for pound, almost certainly the strongest Mr. Olympia champion we've ever seen.
If you were to go and look at what world records look like in the powerlifting space for any division, most of those world records are somewhere in the 3 times an athlete's body weight in that category lift. If you get into the 4 times your body weight lift, that is a very, very unique and small class of athletes that can pull that. And if he weighed between 185 and 200 pounds when he did his 750 pound deadlift, that is a 3.5x lift, a 3.5 times body weight conventional deadlift. That is at a world elite level.
You know, I mean, these numbers are eye popping for an athlete who weighed probably about 200 pounds on stage. Just absolutely eye popping. I wanted to highlight one more. And again, please read this article. This article is great. And it goes into in depth on the training style and capabilities of some legendary lifters. Phil, we're highlighting 3. Let's highlight someone who's a little more contemporary. You mind taking this one away? Because I know he's one of your favorite athletes to cover.
Yeah. 2022 Mr. Olympia, Hadi Choopan. He can rep 675 pounds on the squat, which is supremely heavy. He can get up to 705 pounds for a double in the deadlift. I mean, if we know Hadi, he's not the largest guy on stage, but he's always the most conditioned. His muscle maturity and the graininess of his physique is always second to none. He looks like that at his conditioning level, and then can also lift this heavy. I mean, the guy can hit 440 pounds for 5 reps in the bench press. I mean, this dude is immensely strong, and that does not hinder his aesthetics in any way. It seems to only benefit it. We have Ronnie Coleman as like, you know, he is the paramount in this space. And I always think about it the same way where it's like the LeBron versus Jordan debate. And it's like, if LeBron came first, then nobody would be talking about this debate at all. But Jordan came first. So like, how can it not be Jordan? If Hadi came first, like maybe we're just talking about Hadi the way that we talk about Coleman. You know what I mean? It's like, he's that strong. He's that strong.
Love it. Well, spoiler alert, you should read the article, but Ronnie's the strongest, Franco's the strongest pound for pound, but Hadi, some impressive stuff for a person who's known more for his symmetry and conditioning than anything else, and a true recent champion, and one of the bodybuilders who's always in the conversation today for the Mr. Olympia title. Well, sadly, Phil, or maybe fortunately for folks who are sick of us, that brings us to the end of Strength Weekly, but we'll be back with more in the coming weeks. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, folks. Remember, it's bulking season, and no one can tell you otherwise. Until then, I'm David Thomas Tao.
I'm Phil Blackman with BarBend.com. Enjoy your marshmallow-covered sweet potatoes, everybody.